In this section, we're going to talk about projections and valuations. So a projection is just how a property will perform over time, which helps you come up with future values, and then you can come up with current valuations on what is a property worth today. So when you're looking at projections over time, you're looking at things like rent growth. Are you below market rent? Can you increase rents from where it's at today to market? Or are you assuming you're in an area where rents are increasing over time and inflating? You're looking at your unit turns, how much it's going to cost you to turn the units to get them to a market ready rate. You're going to look at upcoming capital expenditures. So that's things like roofs, water heaters, sidings, all these things that go bad over time you need to account for. Your expense and rent growth over time. So a lot of people make the mistake of assuming maybe 4% rent increases year over year.
Yep.
But they're not accounting for, hey, with inflation, expenses go up as well. So that's something to make sure you're accounting for also. And then you're looking at future market cap rates. So if you're using a cap rate to value a property and you're looking at a 5-year time frame, you now need to look out 5 years into the future and think where cap rates will be at that point in history. Other things you need to look at is your interest rate. So if you're refinancing a property, you need to know where, you're never going to know, but you need to project where interest rates will be and at what range, and if you can withstand where those will be at that time period. And then the last thing you're going to look at is exit strategies. So are you holding this forever on long-term fixed rate debt? Do you have a balloon payment and you're going to need to refi and sell? And things like that.
So I have a question. I deal with a lot of residential loans. We do a lot of 30-year fixed rate debt. Do you need to worry as much about projections if you're getting a loan, 30-year fixed rate debt, where it performs already based off of what you're buying it at?
No. So I love residential for that reason. You get 30-year fixed rate debt, meaning if you buy a deal today, that debt stays the same the entire time. In commercial, you're typically looking at 3-year, 5-year, 7-year, and 10-year balloons. And what I mean by a balloon is meaning that full debt amount is due at that time period.
So you have to refinance, you have to sell.
You have to refinance, you have to sell, you have to do something to restructure the debt. They don't let you hold it for the long period.
And honestly, with a lot of the creative deals that you do, there's balloons tied to a lot of those deals as well. So that could be maybe a negative of the commercial creative side, where these projections start to matter so much, because if you're wrong, you can be wrong pretty big.
Yeah, and it depends on market conditions also. So you're not going to go and assume, hey, in 5 years, interest rates are going to be 3% again.
Right.
You're going to take into account what has trended over time, what can I withstand if things go terribly, what does it look like if it performs how I think, and then if it goes super well and everything's perfect, what does that look like?
So if you're starting out and you want to start trying to come up with projections, but you don't want to take on as much of the risk, if you're starting with 30-year fixed rate debt or some long-term debt, that can take away a lot of the risks of maybe getting some of these things we're about to talk about wrong, right?
Correct. Yeah. Long-term fixed rate debt helps you weather any storm. It's really hard to lose money with it, because even if you buy a bad deal, you'll have appreciation and rent growth over time, and it will fix your problems for you.
Cool.
So this is just to give you guys an example of a tool we personally use and have created. We give this to all our clients we work with to help simplify the math and do the projections over time. So you guys will see here a lot of data similar to the P&Ls, but also takes into account timeframes, future projections, cash flows, and everything you would want to know about a property over the life of the loan. So this just helps you make better financial decisions. And again, we just give this to everyone we work with. And then we have a ton of different calculators too for different deal types.
Yep.
So diving into value, there's a few ways you can come up with it. There's typically 3 ways an appraiser comes up with value. There's the income approach, which looks at your NOI and your cap rates to come up with the value. You have sales comparison approach, which is, hey, the similar property over here sold for this much. This one sold for this much. This property is similar in X, Y, and Z way. It's worth, X amount. And then we have the cost approach, which takes into account what it actually costs to go rebuild that property.
Yep.
So those are the ways the property value is determined in an appraiser's mind. And this is done in residential and commercial. Commercial more so focuses on the income approach, whereas residential focuses on the sales comparison approach more so. And then we have intrinsic and extrinsic value. So this is not used by an appraiser. This is what it's worth to you and what it's worth to the market. So intrinsic is what a property is worth to you, meaning what benefits is it giving you, like the cash flows, the loan pay downs, what are you seeing? The extrinsic value is how the market values the property. And this fluctuates over time drastically. In commercial, as interest rates go up, cap rates typically go up. So when we saw interest rates from beginning of 2022 to the end of 2022, the market said some of those commercial properties were worth 30% less. Even though their incomes had gone up, their NOIs are better, they're performing better than ever. So intrinsically, it could be worth way more to you. The extrinsic value dictated by the market was saying it was worth less. So going back to our 14-unit example, looking again at the broker math, they valued it at $2.9 million. With that 178,000-ish of NOI, which gave us the 6.12 cap.
Yep.
If we then take our math and apply the same formulas with the new NOI, we can come up with what we think it's worth.
So based off of our calculation, where NOI is going to be more like 135,000, what's the difference in value there?
Yeah, so using our math, applying the same cap rate of 6.12, we're coming out to about $2.2 million in value. So we're almost $700,000 short of what they are saying it is worth.
So those expense line items that were just a little different that we looked at make a really big difference. You really got to drill down on those, right?
Yeah, so I mean, it adds up very quickly. Going back to our 5-unit example,
Yep.
when you increased NOI by $6,000 on the year, that was $100,000 in value at a 6 cap. So it's going to be pretty similar for a 6.1 cap.
Right.
So that $40,000 difference in NOI was about $700,000 difference in value on the property.
So if you go to a seller and you say, hey, we have this difference in NOI projected versus your projected, are they typically just like, okay, yeah, it's worth 2.1, let's go with that offer?
No, a lot of the time they're not. So again, you're going back and looking at the data and making sure that you are correct with what you were assuming, but you can justify it with the numbers and checking all those things that we talked about, like the tax returns and whatnot. The seller may budge on some of it, but it depends on their motivation. Eventually, everyone else looking at this is going to come to the same conclusion.
Yep.
Maybe not. Maybe they come across a fool who will come look at it and buy it and not check anything.
Or it's the extrinsic versus intrinsic value. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe it's not a 6.12 cap, but we're still going to need you to buy it at that 5 cap because this is what we think it's still worth.
Correct. So a seller doesn't always have to sell. Just because they want, or just because you want a lower price for a property doesn't mean they have to sell it to you for that. You guys can transact at whatever you want. So you might look at this deal and be like, it's a 4.6 cap. I still like it because they were projecting $1,700 in rents, and I think $2,000 is the market rate for the rent, and I think they're mismanaging it. So it could still be a deal for you. The cap rate is not the end all be all, but using the math that they had versus their P&Ls, it just shows they're pretty far off on value.
Right, so you can come to someone and say, yep, the cap rate's off, and they're going to still be like, well, there's still a lot of upside, and you could say, because you'd buy a 2 cap, you'd buy a cap rate. We don't buy based off cap rates, we buy based off of what we think the property's going to do and how we can make it perform when we buy it, right?
Yeah, I'm seeing what cap rate I can take the property to rather than how it's performing now, and if the price I'm buying it for justifies that.
So really, when you're doing this math, and you say, hey, this isn't a 6.12, this is a 4.8 cap, or whatever you decide it is, that's just more negotiation tool than anything.
Correct. And if a seller is motivated and willing to sell and they look at this, they might understand where you're coming from and give you that discount.
Yep.
Some of them might just tell you to F off too. Who knows? I want you to sign up to work directly with us so you can just shortcut your path to owning more deals and have us help you analyze deals along the way. Click the link below in the description.